What is up, Sports Geeks, and welcome back to the official March Madness bracket from the Sports Geeks. Here, I'm your host, Josh, joined by Nick. As always, Nick, we just dropped the six sleeper teams that we think are going to outperform their projections. You will probably see all six of them outperforming their projection here in our official bracket. But we have, I think, some very, very good some good picks here, and I think this is going to be a great bracket here. So we look at looking at the bracket here. Let's go ahead and pull this up. There's last year, right? We had what, 4 1 seeds in the final four. We're going to try to, not pick 4 1 seeds, but at the same time, we have to be realistic here, right? This is the world of NIL in which there's just going to be a lot of chalk. So I think let's go ahead and start with the East region here. I'm going to go ahead and throw Duke into the round of 32. Don't think there's going to be any arguments from that. Nick, Ohio State, TCU. We talked about Ohio State as a sleeper team. Not to spoil our hands too much, I see Ohio State into the round of 32 here. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yes, I believe that this is a humongous moment for Bruce Thornton. Everybody wants to see him in March. They did enough down the end of the stretch to get there. Did it really safely getting there, playing as well as anybody in the final 2.5 weeks, really. So, yeah, no, I think that they have enough with John Mobley Jr. and Bruce Thornton to get a win against a really pesky and tough TCU team. Shout out to them. But, no, I think they get the job done here and move on to play Duke.
I would agree with that. So we are going to have at least a 5-12, 4-13 upset, but these are a lot harder to come by this year just because same thing as last year, just because of NIL, the world that we're in. Do you see a world where we have St. John's or Kansas not playing in the round of 32 here? Or are you seeing a 4-5 matchup here as well?
I don't see an upset here. I really don't. I think you see the St. John's and Northern Iowa game, and they're completely different ways of playing basketball. Northern Iowa wants to slow you down. They're one of the slowest teams in the country. They're trying to beat you off of as least amount of possessions as possible. And then you see the way that St. John's plays. They're ready to bring it to you. They're ready to defend the shit out of you. And then they want to get out and run, and they're going to bully you down low. So, no, I think that this Northern Iowa team, obviously, I think they were the 6th seed in Arch Madness. So they're not even remotely close to being one of the top teams, in the Valley. So, no, I don't see them really putting up much of a fight. I think it'll be an ugly game. I think it could be a game that's first to 65 wins because that's, how slow and how ugly, of a brand these teams play. And then you go to Kansas. I don't see Cal Baptist really doing much to them. I think this Kansas team's good enough. Whether you get the Darren Peterson you believe you're going to get, I think they are too athletic. I know it probably helps Cal Baptist that they're playing in California. So that's a little bit of a help for them, but I think they might have 100 fans in total. So really not going to make much of a difference. So, yeah, I see the 4 and the 5 matchup, and we finally get the Rick Pitino versus Bill Self matchup that they tried to get last year and couldn't get because Calipari and the Razorbacks had to go and spoil that.
Yeah, no kidding. But I agree. I think St. John's and Kansas, this is not a 4-5 matchup that I'm going to be picking an upset in. No, I look at the 6-11 though matchup here, and this is a game I'm going to be at. This is the first game of the day on Thursday. I'm going to be there in Buffalo watching my Spartans play, which I will go ahead and put my Spartans above the North Dakota State Jackrabbits there. But Louisville, South Florida, it is funny. I think there's 2 games in this first round where both teams play the exact same style of basketball, and it's this one and it's Clemson against Iowa because both teams play very fast. Both teams want the maximum amount of possessions as possible, and both teams want to chuck threes, right?
Yep.
This is going to be a very entertaining game to watch. This is a complete pick 'em in my mind. I know the sports Vegas is saying it's about a 5-point spread for Louisville. This is a complete pick 'em in my mind because it's whatever team is going to just hit threes when they need to hit threes. And I think if any team can get to the foul line at a consistent rate, I don't necessarily think that's either one of these teams' strengths. Also, we have Michael Brown Jr. that's saying he's going to play. It's back spasms, though. And back spasms, as we know, it is so hard to come play with back spasms.
Yeah.
And as soon as you think you're healthy, you're going to go up for a layup and contort your body like Michael Brown is very good at doing. And as soon as you contort your body, your back's going to say, nope, we're done. So I'm not counting on his health at any point in this tournament. I think Louisville drops off a lot without him. That's what we've seen in the last month of play without him. I like the South Florida pick here as an 11 over a 6, but I realistically could see either one of these teams who it's just whoever shoots better.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it comes down to is Michael Brown, is he going to play? If he doesn't, I think South Florida can get the win. I think they're pesky enough to go out and do it. I think they're athletic enough to go out and do it. But if he plays, I think that he will be enough to get the win for Louisville. I think this is probably going to be the sexiest upset pick that probably in the whole bracket, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are already flocking to South Florida, believing that they can get it done, and I think they can. But I really think it's going to come down to, are we going to have Michael Brown Jr. or not? Because if we don't, then it's all going to fall on the back of Ryan Conwell. Can Conwell get the job done? Yes, but is he going to be enough? Probably not. So no, I'm 100% with you. I'm 50-50 on this, so I'm completely okay with taking either team because I think they both would go on to lose your Spartans anyway.
We will go with the South Florida Bulls there to get an upset. And
First upset of the bracket.
First upset of the bracket right there. And then I don't think we see either one of these down here. We talked about UCLA on the sleeper teams.
Yep.
UCLA is a very, very, very talented team. Donovan Dent is maybe a top 3 guard in the nation right now with the basketball that he's playing at an extremely high level. And Mick Cronin did say Dent and Tyler Bilodeau will both be healthy.
Yes.
For the first weekend. So I don't see a problem with that. I will say very rarely do you see a 7-10 matchup with a spread of like more than a cup, maybe a possession or two. And this is like an 8-point spread, I believe, when I checked. So there's a reason for that. UCLA is significantly the better team. We talked about UCF kind of limping to the tournament. They were not the same team when they're away from home. And they're certainly not at home here. So
I mean, they started off the year 17-4, and now are, I believe, 21-11.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken. So yes, this is a team that, really did their damnedest to try to not make the tournament and basically had themselves done for playing, my Bearcats, but somehow Wes Miller didn't want his job anymore and he gave them the win. So he felt bad for him. So UCF fans, you're welcome for even making the tournament, because if you lose that game, there's a very high chance you aren't even in and playing this game. So yeah, this is a team that, like I said, started off 17-4. Completely hit a roadblock down the stretch, was not playing good basketball.
Nope.
And I think UCLA is just starting to play their best basketball that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, barring, any injuries.
So my question for you, Nick, here is I think that I see Michigan State past South Florida or Louisville. I see that comfortably.
Yes.
I see Duke past Ohio State. I don't want to say comfortably, but I see that happening, right? I think that Duke's just too good on the interior for Ohio State. However, don't be surprised at all if Ohio State makes this a very good game because no Caleb Foster, because if you look at the guard play, and you want to lean towards veteran guard play, Bruce Thornton blows Caden Boozer out of the water in veteran, right? And in games played, overall experience. And as of right now, I would say Bruce Thornton is a significantly better college player than Caden Boozer. Caden Boozer will end up being better, maybe not as a college player, certainly is a better pro prospect, but Bruce Thornton is definitely very good. And Ohio State's playing very good basketball right now, too. We talked about that. But the St. John's, Kansas game and the UCLA UConn game, both I think are going to be just great second round matchup games. I mean, UCLA UConn, we're talking about 2 legendary programs here, right? I mean, I know UCLA is the kind of a legendary program of the past, but you have one of the hottest teams in college basketball right now in UCLA Bruins against UConn, a team that 2 years ago, goes on a back-to-back for the first time since the 06-07 Florida Gators. And Dan Hurley brings in his guys this year. You've got Alex Caravan, right? The only guy left from those teams. You have plenty of, talented freshmen, right? You have Braylon Mullins in there. You have Terrace Reed down low. However, you played in a very weak Big East, and I mean very weak Big East. You played St. John's 3 times in the year. You kicked their teeth in once. They kicked your teeth in once, and you lost to them regular, in a close game. I don't know who I see kind of giving this the edge to the UCLA UConn game. I'm leaving that as a pick 'em. I will say I think that St. John's beats Kansas in this game. This is a tough game to predict because St. John's is relatively inconsistent at the guard position, but they generate so many offensive rebounds. And I look at the interior. I'm almost talking myself out of this because Badunga's an absolute animal, right? And Tiller's pretty good too. it's just Ejiofor is an absolute animal down
Yeah.
low. I don't know. I think it's going to come down to the how hard does Darren Peterson play. But I don't know. I think both of these are toss ups. Whichever way you lean, I think I would slightly lean to get an upset in here in UCLA, and then slightly lean towards St. John's. But I could be convinced either way. Whichever one you want, Nick, is what we'll go with for the official bracket here.
Yeah, so in one of my first brackets I did, after obviously hearing Mick Cronin say that they are going to be at full strength, they will be ready to go, and I was like, well, then 100%. I mean, they're playing some of the better basketball I think in the country right now. So I think that yes, I agree. I think they can upset UConn. I think this is a UConn team probably hasn't been playing like a 2 seed, I would say. So I don't think they're necessarily deserving of it. Like you said, they took advantage of a really, really bad Big East. Obviously, it's not a really good Big East because you have St. John's who, won the regular season and then won the tournament, and they're a 5 seed.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that speaks alone that, kind of how poor the Big East was this year. But then I also think I'm going to lean St. John's as well because we don't know what Kansas team we're going to get, and I think it's too tough to put all our eggs in that Kansas basket when we really don't know who they're going to be. Is Darren Peterson going to play like the Darren Peterson we believe, or is he going to play like the Darren Peterson that we've been seeing to where he's not really looking like he wants to be aggressive on defense, he's not really doing a ton on offense, kind of really getting most of his points from the free throw line. And I think that's kind of what's worrying me right now is that this St. John's team is going to be physical. They're going to want to get out and run, and they have the advantage down low in the paint with Zuby Ejiofor. And then you also have the Swiss Army knife in Dylan Mitchell, and I think that's going to be kind of the deciding factors. I think Dylan Mitchell is a more athletic and better player than Trey White, and I don't think Trey White's going to be able to guard him when he tries to take him down low and slashes into the lane. But my really big thing with this region is, and I want to bring it up to you, is why do we have 2 Big East teams in this region?
Yes, thank you
that
for
have
saying
already
that.
that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I know we're obviously picking the bracket here, but I just wanted to bring that up because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then also, like, people say this is the hardest region, and I could see why because it's a bunch of blue bloods. But I think if we're being honest here, I think Duke honestly kind of lucked out with this region because these are blue bloods, but they're not all really, really good.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it, I think the only team that's legitimately scary is Izzo in March. And I think that this, obviously, they played early in the year and it was a really good game. Duke won at the Breslin by 6. But other than that, I mean, I'm not scared of UConn. I'm not scared of Kansas. They haven't played consistently all year. And then St. John's is 0 guard play whatsoever. And that actually helps Duke out a lot. That's going to be humongous for Caden Boozer if St. John's gets to that game against Duke.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think it's a really weird region. I didn't understand much of why they would put 2 Big East teams in this region, but I've seen a lot of people online and on social media say that it's not fair that this happened to Duke. I can see why, because if you take a first glance at it, you see all of these blue bloods, you see all of these Hall of Fame coaches. But then you take a look at their roster and you're like, okay, that's not nearly as bad as people, are kind of putting it out to be.
Yeah, I think it might have been Clark Kellogg. I can't necessarily remember who it was, but they were talking about this East, and somebody interrupted them and said, "You're just naming brands. Is the problem?
You're naming brands of basketball.
Brands, but it's not necessarily." I thought the dog was getting into something there for a second. You're naming brands, but you're not necessarily naming teams that are playing spectacular basketball right now, right? Like, for example, a team like Iowa State compared to a team like UConn. As a Michigan State with the 3 seed, I would take UConn 10 times out of 10 before I would take Iowa State, right? UConn is the bigger brand. Iowa State's a better basketball team right now. So I think that's, yes, I completely agree with the Big East comment. You have 3 Big East teams in the bracket. You should find a way for them to not be
put them in separate. Exactly. Put them in separate regions. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah. But I think Michigan State gets their revenge on UCLA here.
Agreed.
I do. I think Duke is just a better version of St. John's. I think that if you're talking about guard play, it's not necessarily there for either one of these teams without Caleb Foster. Boozer is going to be, getting significantly better throughout the season. But I look at the St. John's team, they try to bang you down low. It's exactly what Cam Boozer is going to do. Yes, Ejiofor is very, very good. Boozer is a stud. And I think that as you allow Ngangba will be healthy by that, right? By the second weekend, I think Ngangba is definitely going to be back.
Yes.
And that's going to be crucial there. We get a Duke Michigan State rematch. I'm going to completely opt out of this. Nick, whichever team you want to go with, they will make it to the Final Four. But I clearly would pick Michigan State. I am as biased as can be. This right here, you can't really see, is a signed piece of hardwood floor by Tom Izzo. I am a Michigan State advocate, but whatever team you go with there, I'm going to accept.
I've been kind of stuck on this one in making some of my early brackets. I think I've probably went about 50-50 on who I've put in the championship game here. And I think it honestly comes down to the guard position. Who's going to guard Jeremy Fears? Because we've seen the way Jeremy Fears has been playing down the stretch. He's been playing fantastic basketball. No matter what anybody's saying about him in the media, he's playing good basketball. And I think this is a spot where Izzo thrives because guess what? He loves playing Duke in March.
Mm-hmm.
People forget that he knocked out Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish. Like that team, he knocked them out to go. I mean, I think he does it again. I really do. I think he does it again. Okay. Because I think John Shire's lying. I don't think that Foster's coming back this year.
No.
He had surgery on a fractured foot. I don't see it happening. That then throws, a tough spot for Caden Boozer to have to try to guard, Jeremy Fears, or Dame Sara have to try to guard Jeremy Fears. And I think that he's athletic enough and shifty enough to where he could probably get either one of those guys in foul trouble and, really change the whole mo of the game, because I think Michigan State's good enough to battle down low. I think we saw it in the first game when they played each other. And I think that, Izzo really does a good job of getting his teams ready to play in March. And, that's the reason that John Rothstein literally calls March Izzo instead.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say here is I think this game is largely dependent on Caleb Foster's status.
Yeah,
like you said,
for sure.
I completely agree. I think he's out. I don't see a way where he's coming back. John Shire seems to think there's some hope, whether that's just smoke or whether that's true. I hope for Caleb Foster's sake that he can come back. I think this stinks. Anytime you have a season like this, right? I think back to like Marcus Sasser and the Houston teams, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you're a clear-cut 1 seed, you have national title aspirations, and you lose your starting point guard. It is so hard to lose your starting point guard. Other than your star player, your starting point guard is the most important part of your team, especially in March.
I mean,
so I hate to see that, but I do think if
he plays, I think Duke wins.
Yes, I would agree with that.
If he doesn't, then I think Michigan State wins.
Yep, I would agree with that. So down here we have there's 2 1 seeds here that I want to talk about. We'll talk about both these and then we'll get back up to the West. Both of these 1 seeds. This is a very interesting stat that I saw today. You have 2 1 seeds here that are negative on the turnover margin on the season, both Florida and Michigan. And with history says that teams that are positive in turnover margins, 1 or 2 seeds that are positive in turnover margin, make the Sweet 16 at a, like 70 something percent rate. And teams that are negative percent or negative turnover margin make the Elite 8 at like a 28% clip. So I know we're talking Sweet 16, Elite 8, so 2 different rounds there, right? But a 28% chance for Florida to make it and for Michigan to make it, according to stats. Now, given that, I think that Michigan has a very, very good route there. I think with Bama as your 4 seed and no Aiden Holloway, Texas Tech as your 5 seed, no JT Toppin, I think they have a great route. Florida, on the other hand, I don't necessarily think has a great route. You might have to play Vanderbilt again. We just saw what Vanderbilt did to them in the SEC tournament. Hard to do that twice, but at the same time, is there writing on the wall? I think that we're not going to pick Prairie View A&M or Lehigh over Florida there. I feel bad for whichever one of those teams has to go play the front court of Chinyelu and Condon.
Yeah.
But I think this Clemson-Iowa game is another game I touched on earlier. These are the exact same style of basketball. I'm going to lean towards Iowa. I am a Big Ten guy over the ACC, but I think Iowa, Bennett Sturts is the best player on the court. I'm going to put the ball in the best player's hands late in that stretch. McNeese against Vanderbilt. I do think McNeese is a dangerous team. We've thought they've been a dangerous team for several years now. I think Vanderbilt just has too many guys that are too confident shooting the ball, right? Tanner, Tanner Nickel, Duke Miles, all three of those guys are very, very good, right? Duke Miles is a veteran at this point, fourth school in 4 years. So I think that they have three guys here that are very, very good at shooting the ball. And then Tanner and Duke Miles are very good at facilitating as well. So I really like Vanderbilt there. Nebraska looking to get the first tournament win, March Madness win in school history, and at the same time, break the school record for wins in a season.
For wins, yeah.
Do you think they do it against Troy here, Nick? A lot of pressure, probably the most pressure we've seen on a 4 seed to win a game, maybe ever, right? In the first round.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this Troy team shoots the lights out of the 3-point ball. They love to shoot the three. It's scary. I don't know. I'm not a big Nebraska guy. I haven't been all year. I don't like the style of basketball they play. I find it to be very, very boring to watch. But I have seen a lot of people talk about how this could be a possible upset spot. They could see this, the writing on the wall with Nebraska, the headlines of, oh, they haven't won and, they've never won. This is the chance to, get the single season win record at Nebraska, blah, blah, blah. And then they come out and they lay an egg. I think they'll win the first round game. But then I think that they will get absolutely smashed by Vanderbilt. I think it's ridiculous that Vanderbilt's a 5 seed.
Yep.
I think, it happens. Obviously, the committee, you have to switch Arkansas to a 4 seed after getting the win yesterday in the SEC championship. But once again, why are we putting Florida and Vanderbilt right next to each other in the regions? They've literally just played each other. I don't understand that. And don't get me wrong, I think the committee did a fantastic job this year. I think they got all 68 teams correct. I just think that there was a few spots where they didn't put teams in the correct spot. But at least it shows that they are valuing the these conference championships, because they did. They switched around Vanderbilt and they switched around Arkansas, and it just shows me. So it's like, all right, if Vanderbilt wins, they would have been the 4 seed where Arkansas is. Yep. They would have been playing Hawaii.
Well, I think
Arkansas would have been down here playing McNeese. But it's like, I don't understand how you can only give Vanderbilt a 5 the way they've been playing. They're easily a 4 line.
I think the question that I would ask is we've seen historically they don't value conference tournament as much as we think they should, right? So whether you're not going to boost Vanderbilt up too much, with the win over Florida. Again, I don't necessarily agree with it. Beating Florida is one of the best wins you can have, in the nation. But I look at
and then Vanderbilt, see him in the
Vanderbilt
Sweet
is a 5 and St. John's is a 5. And why can't you swap those? I understand you want St. John's in the East, but why can't you put St. John's in a region with no other Big East teams, and then put Vanderbilt in a region where they don't have to play the 1 seed of Florida, who they just played? So I think there's minor swaps like that right now. Granted, it does make sense for the Big East team to be in the East and the Southeastern Conference team to be in the South. But I think that these teams probably care more about matchups than they do the slight locational difference.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I think Florida takes care of Iowa, by the way. This Iowa team struggles on the interior, and Florida will beat the absolute living crap out of them on the interior, making a great, and I mean great, Sweet 16 matchup. Both times these two teams have played. I mean, I guess the one in the SEC tournament really wasn't a good game, but I don't think we're going to see a blowout here from either side. This is going to be a great game here. Moving down to North Carolina to VCU. You talked about the VCU Rams here. Do you think they get it done in the first round against North Carolina?
You know what? Let's do it. We might as well. I mean, we always talk about how chalky it's going to be. Let's throw in an upset there. I think this is a North Carolina team that, came out completely flat against Clemson, and they also showed, how to beat them, really. And it's basically just run high, pick and ball screen and shoot threes. This is a Carolina team that doesn't guard the 3-point line well. They don't guard very well in general. And then they can also go very, very cold on the offensive end. They don't shoot the deep ball very well. So they kind of rely a lot on Henry Vasar down low. And yes, he's going to get his, but if you're going to, like I said, in the top 6 sleeper teams, if you're going to trade threes with twos, you're going to win the game. And I think that VCU, if they get hot enough and they go on a bit of a run here, I think they can easily get our second upset of the 11-6 matchup and send Carolina packing home early.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we have 2 11 seeds now into the round of 32. And I do think that I think Illinois takes care of Penn. As you can hear the dog interested in going outside in the background there. I think Illinois takes care of Penn.
Yeah.
This Illinois team, I think them having a match, being a 3 as opposed to like a 5 is so important because what they have is kind of an interesting ability to blow a lead and not play well for a given game. And I think if you give them a game to basically get settled in, that this Illinois team gets really dangerous. So I think they would take care of ECUF actually pretty comfortably just
Yeah.
because they're settled in now. You get a guy like Keaton Wagler with a March Madness game under his belt. You get a guy like Mirkovic with a March Madness game under his belt. But they have some great size. They also can defend the 3 very well, in which I think VCU would then struggle, right? Once you have that. St. Mary's A&M is an interesting matchup. I know I look at the 7 seeds, and a lot of the 7 seeds I really like, and this is one that I like. St. Mary's, I think A&M is kind of limping to the tournament. We saw them limp to the SEC tournament and then get their teeth kicked in by Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I like St. Mary's here. I really like Houston, and I am a big advocate for Houston this year, Nick. You will see that on my individual bracket, right? We might not take them as far as I take them in my individual bracket here. This Houston team has very good guards. They have an elite closer in Kingston Flemings, and we talk about you have to have veteran guard play. You can't rely on freshmen. They don't, because they have Sharp, right? The all-time leading 3-point made or 3-point field goals made leader at the University of Houston. They have Milos Uzan, who's very, very talented, right? Those guys played a national championship game last year, played in a very, very intense Final Four game last year. So they're plenty capable. They're plenty experienced. I think Kingston Flemings is their closer, but he doesn't have to be their closer, and that's why I think Houston can be very, very good in March.
I agree, and I think they'll beat Illinois. I think that Houston's more complete. Houston's more complete team. Like you brought up, this Illinois team that has shown flashes of being really, really good, but then they've also shown you flashes where you're like, is this even the same team?
Right.
And I think that, Kelvin Sampson's going to have this team ready to go. It also helps because I believe the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 are in Houston, if I'm not mistaken. So that was another thing where Houston was able to backdoor their way into, if they get there, having a home game in the heart of Houston. So I think that's definitely going to benefit them. And I think, it's chalky, obviously, but I think that it's, deservingly so that they get to that Elite 8 spot.
It is in Houston, just confirmed that. So, yes. Okay. Now, Florida Vanderbilt rematch. Do you think Florida gets it done this time?
I do.
Okay. So we have a 1-3-1-2, and believe it or not, that is less chalky than what a lot of people will have, because a lot of people will have 1-2-1-2. And we have a 3 seed here in the Final Four, and that's already breaking a lot of trends. Florida Houston here. This is a spectacular matchup, Nick. I would lean Houston in the sense I think Houston's going to turn them over, and I think that when it comes down to it, if the guard play for Florida, we will talk about this, we've talked about this all March. The guard play for Florida is what it's dependent on. If you're going to get a Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee taking care of the ball and playing remotely competent on offense, this Florida team is going to go win the national championship, in my opinion. If they're not going to, if they're going to play inconsistent, if you're going to get them to turn the ball over, especially playing an Elite 8 game where it's one game in Houston, right? So it's not like you have 4 fan bases there. You have 2 fan bases there, and it's probably 80% Houston fans. It's pretty much a home game for Houston.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very, very tough environment. Now, having said that, Florida on the interior is so good. JoJo Tugler is going to have to stay out of foul trouble. Snack's going to have to really man up and play like he's not a freshman. Not that he doesn't. I don't mean man up in a condescending way by any means, but he's going to have to play like he's a junior or senior, not like he's a freshman, because I can guarantee you the guys for Florida, Chinyelu is certainly not going to play like a freshman, and Condon's not going to either.
Yeah.
So this is a heck of a matchup. I'm curious to see. I think whoever wins this game makes the national championship. I will say that. I think my Michigan State Spartans Final Four, I think, is their I've seen a couple people picking them to the national championship. I think Billis did. I think Seth Greenberg did.
Yeah. Yep.
I think Seth Greenberg actually had a Michigan State Michigan national championship, which would be crazy.
He did.
But I think whoever wins this game beats Michigan State. Who do you think gets out of the South region here?
I think the Florida Gators do it. I hopped on the Florida Gators train. I'm not looking too deep into what happened with Vandy. That's basically a home game for Vandy down there. Vandy's been
Yep.
playing really good hoops, and obviously, then you can be like, well, Nick, Houston's obviously going to be playing good hoops if they get to the Elite Eight to play Florida, and they're playing in their own backyard as well. Yes, you're right, but I don't think Houston is nearly as good of a team as Vanderbilt is. If we're being honest with you, Houston has their holes, and
Mm.
we've seen it all year. They go on stretches where they don't score for 10 minutes.
Yep.
They go on stretches where JoJo Tugler and has to sit on the bench because he has 3 or 4 fouls.
Yep.
And they go on stretches where Sharps has to sit out because he gets 2 early fouls in the first 10 minutes of the game, and then they're dribbling up top, hoping that somehow Kingston Flemings can make a long 2-pointer, because they do make the most long 2-pointers in the Power Five, because for some reason they just sit up there and dribble up top around the arc, but they don't take threes. They just take the longest twos. And then I think you look at this Florida team. They are so good down low that, former Big 12 player, defensive player of the year, JoJo Tugler, who has been not good this year for Houston and really a disappointment down low, because he was supposed to be the guy, come back and be the reigning, Big 12 defensive player of the year. I think he is going to get destroyed down low.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where this game lives and dies by, because I feel like, yes, Houston's got really good guards, but these aren't guards where you're going to have to worry about them lighting you up for 10 plus threes, because it doesn't usually happen that often.
Right.
I think you'll get Flemings who will give you maybe 3 or 4 threes, and I think Sharp will give you some. But Uzan, another guy that we've talked about all year, has been disappointing. He has not been what he's supposed to be, and I think if he was playing to the level everybody thought he was gonna be when he decided to come back after he tested the NBA draft waters, that this would be a Houston team that probably wouldn't even be on the 2 line. They'd probably be on the 1 line. But no, I have Florida winning this, and then I have Florida going and beating your Spartans. And I have Florida winning it all. So whatever you want to do with that, but I do have Florida as my champion.
I am fine with picking Florida to be the national champion there. I do think the final thing I'll say about this game here, the Florida Houston game, I don't think people understand how impactful this game is for the national championship. There is a way in which this game is almost more important, not more important, but is maybe the closest game, the toughest game for the national champion. I very clearly see a way in which whoever wins this game and has the momentum to win this game, because I look at who's coming out of the East region. I think if it's Duke, I like Florida over Duke. I think if it's Michigan State, I like Florida over Michigan State. And same thing with Houston in that sense. This is a huge game here. So going down here, we talked about Michigan. In that game, obviously, we're not going to pick a 16 seed over Michigan. They're too big. I would love to as a Michigan State fan, but I would lose all credibility pretty quickly, I think, Nick. Georgia St. Louis, I think, is actually going to be a really good game. This is a game I will be at as well. This is a game where you look at these two teams.
First to 90 wins.
Yeah, first to 90 wins. They play fast and they shoot the 3 ball well. Both teams do. I think St. Louis gets them, but I think Georgia's plenty good to do it. This is a pick 'em in my mind.
Yeah, no, I'm completely fine with taking either side in this. I agree with you. These are two teams that aren't necessarily horrible on the defensive end. It's just more or less they get out and run, and they would just want to beat you. They want to outscore you.
Yep.
And I think they both shoot the ball very well from outside. I think these are both very athletic teams. And my biggest thing is going to be how is Robbie Avila able to handle these athletic Georgia big men? How is he able to play and fit into this game, because he is a kind of bigger, dumpier white guy. How is he gonna fit into this up and down game that these teams want to play? And I'm sure he probably will fit in fine, but I think that's a really big thing is can he actually do it? This is also a St. Louis team, if I'm not mistaken, ended the year 4-4. They haven't been playing their greatest basketball. They obviously got picked off by Dayton in a really, really good game in the A10 semis. So no, I'm completely fine with picking either. I don't think it really matters much, because whoever wins is going to get smashed by Michigan. But yeah, I could see, I agree with you. I could see either side winning.
Yeah, I think I will say Catchings is playing very good basketball right now. Khalil Catchings is playing very good basketball, so something to monitor. If you're going to see somebody go on a little Jack Golke run, Catchings is somebody that has length that allows him to get any shot off, which is kind of what you need to do that. So I don't mind that. I think we're going to go with Georgia here, actually. We're going to go with Georgia just because I think they're playing better basketball as of right now. But both of these teams, I think, will lose to Michigan. Obviously, pending somebody just goes unconsciously hot and Michigan goes cold. But I think
Yeah.
Michigan's too good, too impressive down low there. We talked about this game here. I think the Akron is a potential biggest upset of the bracket here for us to pick. I do think Bama still beats Hofstra. I don't think. Don't get me wrong, Hofstra's a decent option for an upset pick, but I just think that Bama, LeBaron Philon is so much of
Yeah.
the better player.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and I also think that if you're going to beat Bama, you need to dominate them on the glass, and Hofstra's not necessarily a team that's going to do that. So I like here. Oh, I switched back to there we go. We got Akron against Bama, and I don't even mind Akron to the Sweet 16. I think this is going to be an interesting game here. Nick, thoughts on this game?
I think this game is really going to come down to, can LeBaron Philon guard Tavari Johnson without fouling? Can he keep himself on the floor, knowing that there's a very high chance that they're not going to have Aiden Holloway now, following the news that we found out this Monday afternoon, dealing with drugs and other alleged possible firearm charges. I think that yes, he's obviously not their number one guy. Holloway is, but he's a very, very key part of this team. He's a guy that has tournament run under his belt. But I think if Alabama even remotely shoots the ball well from deep, I think they'll be fine. I think it kind of helps them too that they're in a little 4-pack here where there's not really many good big men. And I think that helps Bama because obviously we saw what we had early in the year with Charles Bediako when they tried to bring him in because they knew they needed help down low. And I think that, this is going to help Bama. This is probably going to play into the favor of Aiden Sherrill. He should be able to get his against this Akron team. And I think if they shoot the ball even remotely, fine. I think they can get to that matchup with Michigan. But then I think that's where you kind of see it go south for Bama.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think Bama's in a spot where they have a relatively easy matchup against Hofstra that's fitting. Texas Tech's the team. If they play Texas Tech, I think Texas Tech beats Bama. I think if Texas Tech can get through the first game, I think they beat Bama. But I think Texas Tech has a lot more difficult first game than what Bama does. So it'd be interesting to see there. But I think down here, I don't like. You have three teams here. I don't like any of these three teams. I think Tennessee's inconsistent as hell. They're so reliant on Nate Ament too. You don't know who you're going to get. Are you going to get the Nate Ament that played the second half of their game? That I'm trying to blank on who they were playing. Auburn. You're going to get the second half Tennessee or second half Nate Ament against Auburn, or are you going to get the Nate Ament against Vanderbilt where he goes 1 for 12 from the floor? So I think there's two very different players that you're going to get. Gillespie, I think, is a relatively consistent guard, but I also think that there's plenty of room for improvement from him too. Miami of Ohio, I don't like. I think they capitalize on an extremely weak schedule, and even in that, there's a reason why they were not the highest net team in the MAC. I will say that. SMU is limping, and I mean limping to the tournament. They lost 5 of their last 6. Their only win was against Syracuse, who is an atrocious program right now. They fired their head coach, their GM. They fired everybody there. So I don't
think
like
the
any
only
of the three
thing,
teams, but I think Tennessee gets it done just because I don't think either of these teams in the 11. I think SMU beats Miami, Ohio pretty comfortably almost, but SMU is limping to the tournament right now. I think Tennessee is going to capitalize on that.
I think that's the biggest thing, at least what catches my eye with this SMU team, is they lost one of their starters in BJ Edwards for most of that run when they did lose. I think it was all the run, actually, when they lost 5 out of 6 to end the year. And when he played, they were a pretty good team. I mean, when he played, they went and they beat Carolina. And then they went to Cameron Indoor and challenged Duke. I mean, they played a really good game against Duke. So I think it's going to be one of those situations where if BJ Edwards, he is supposed to come back, BJ Edwards. If he plays and he plays to, the capability that he is, I think that they make easy work of Miami, Ohio in the first 4, kind of validating what everybody believed. But if he doesn't play, then I think you give Miami of Ohio a chance, but still don't think it's enough. I mean, this is a really, really good guard-heavy SMU team. Because you have him, then you also have Boopy Miller, and we've seen what Boopy Miller can do. I mean, he went off for 27 against Carolina. You got them that win, and it's really just going to be, can SMU win that first 4 game, and then carry that momentum, to Tennessee. And I don't think they will. I think Tennessee's good enough to get the win there. But like we said, this Tennessee team it's a bore. They're not necessarily fun to watch. It depends what Nate Ament you're going to get, and usually it's either a boom or a complete bust, and he's not really going to meet you anywhere in the middle. And then I think, like you said, with Gillespie, he can get lucky to give you anywhere in that 10 to 12 range, but he doesn't do it very efficiently. I feel like in the SEC tournament, he took a while to get going, and I think that's a problem, especially come March. But I don't think it'll be an issue against either Miami of Ohio or SMU.
Yep, I would agree with that. No, I think Virginia takes care of Tennessee there. I don't want to say comfortably because I think in ending round of 32 game, especially with a 6-3, it's not necessarily going to be a blowout. Very rarely do you see blowouts, but I think Virginia is definitely the better team there. When we come down here, I think that Kentucky against Santa Clara is a game that, in my mind, I am going to go ahead and pick Iowa State over Tennessee State, Nick. So if you had a 15/2 there, apologies. But Kentucky Santa Clara is such an odd one because I think Kentucky, you have a Tagovailoa, who I think is a great player, but you are without Jelon Lowe and Jaden Quaintance, and Jaden Quaintance is an absolute animal, maybe one of the best defensive players in the nation if he's playing.
Yeah,
and Jelon Lowe is very, very creative on the ball as well. I think Kentucky's kind of an interesting team where I don't know what they're going to do. Colin Chandler could come out and he could go 5 for 7 from 3 in a game, and Otagovailoa could give you 28. Right.
Yeah.
But then there's also a game in which Otagovailoa gives you 12 on like 4 of, 16 from the floor. And Colin Chandler's 1 for 6 from 3. And I don't think, I don't know which Kentucky team I'm getting. This is a complete toss up. Now, I will say this. I don't think it matters who wins this game at all. Iowa State's going to beat the absolute living breaks off of whoever wins this game. Nick, Kentucky or Santa Clara, flip the coin, and who you choosing?
I'm going to go with Kentucky just on the sole fact that I think Otagovailoa is good enough and has been playing good enough to where he can go get them anywhere from 20 to 25, like you said. And he's done that. I think he's on a streak of scoring 20 plus in the past 5 to 6 games, and he really is their source of offense. But then if you're going to get Denzel Everdeen playing anywhere where we know he can play, I think that they can do enough to get at least a first-round win against Santa Clara, who, credit to them, they played their way into the tournament, and that's what you always look for when it comes to bubble teams. You want them to play their way in. They played their way in. Now, they didn't go and win the WCC championship, but they lost to a valiant team in Gonzaga. So, no, I think Kentucky can do enough to get a win. I think it's going to be really, really close. But I wouldn't be surprised if, we see the end of this game and we see Santa Clara playing Iowa State in the second round.
Yeah.
But I am going with Kentucky.
No, I would agree. I like that there. I think Iowa State against Virginia. I'm picking Iowa State every time here. Iowa State's guard plays very, very good. Their interior plays very, very good, and Momcilovic has a literal strap on him. That is maybe one of the most impressive things we've seen. Leading to, I think, we talk about the Florida-Houston game. This Michigan-Iowa State game is going to be a spectacular game. Michigan's been one of the best teams in the year, or in the nation all year, but the clear-cut weakness in Michigan is they have 2 of them. It's turning the ball over and it's defending the 3-point line. And I think Iowa State is the perfect 2 seed to exploit that because Lipsey is a great guard. He's going to get the best. I think he's going to get the best of Elliot Cadeau, right? I think he's going to outplay Elliot Cadeau. No LJ Kaysen for Michigan, I think hurts a lot more than what people realize. And I think that when you have somebody that can size-wise defend the interior, right? Amara is going to have 4 or 5 inches on Buchanan, right? But Jefferson is plenty wide to defend Johnson. You have Momcilovic, who is plenty tall and plenty big to defend Lendeborg. So Michigan's advantage is not as much of an advantage, but I think that the guard play of Iowa State can beat the guard play of Michigan, and I think Momcilovic can have a great game here. I think I would take Iowa State to the Final Four here over Michigan. Granted, I'm a Michigan State fan. I don't like Michigan. That's how that is going to be. I think Iowa State is a perfect storm to beat Michigan in this situation, though.
I like it. I agree. I 100% agree with that. I think this is an Iowa State team that, like we said earlier in the year, they proved it. They were a top 5 team in the nation. They were playing, some would even say, is probably close to being the number 1 team in the nation as well as they were playing. And I think they are able to get the best of this Michigan team. I think, you know, losing LJ Kaysen is a lot more than people want to give it credit
Hmm.
for. I think people are trying to sweep it under the rug like it's really not that big of a deal. But I think, when you got a point guard like Taman Lipsey going up against Elliot Cadeau, it's a fantastic point guard matchup. But I think that Taman Lipsey, is a lot better of an overall point guard and a leader than Elliot Cadeau is. And I think that that's shown throughout the year. And then obviously you look at Momcilovic and you look at Jefferson. Those are two guys that could quite literally, be all
Yep,
Americans. I mean, they've played that well this
absolutely.
year. They're going to make NBA teams very happy, whether that be next year or 2 years down the road, whatever it is. They are going to be on NBA rosters. You will see them playing in the National Basketball Association. So I'm completely fine with taking that. I think I said earlier that I've had Iowa State probably in 50% of my brackets going to the Final Four. I think it really is, either Michigan or Iowa State. I don't think anybody else challenges this region. I think this is the easiest region out of all of them. And I think Michigan and Iowa State should have no problem meeting up in the Elite Eight, but I would give the slight edge to Iowa
Yeah,
State.
I would say easiest region when it comes to other contenders outside of the 1 and 2 seed, because Michigan and Iowa State, I think, are like with the overall health of Duke right now. I think Michigan might be the best 1 seed. Maybe you could say Florida,
Yeah.
and Iowa State, in my opinion, is the best 2 seed. So I think you maybe have the best 1 seed, best 2 seed here, but your 3 seed I don't think is overly competitive in Virginia. I Your 4 seed in Bama, obviously the hit to Holloway is a huge difference in this team, and then Texas Tech is not necessarily a 5 seed with the health of their roster either. So let's go ahead and find and
Yeah.
round out this final region here before we get to the final four there. I will say this. I think that as we go through this, I'm going to go ahead and fly through this first round, and I want to hear any objections. I think Arizona. I think Utah State's much better than Villanova. I think Villanova is the
Yes.
Big East is not good this year, and they were just the third team that ended up getting in. I think Wisconsin, Arkansas both win and set up for a doozy, and I mean a doozy of a second round
Yeah.
game. I think Texas or NC State, whoever wins that, is plenty capable to beat BYU. And I think, assuming Texas wins, I'd like this. If NC State wins, I think maybe BYU wins. And then we're going to take Gonzaga over Kennesaw State. If a 3 seed is going to lose in the first round, it will be Gonzaga. I will say that, but I don't think a 3 seed is going to lose. And then I'm going to take Miami and Purdue. Nick, thoughts on that? The only upset we have here is the 11th seed, but I think that's kind of just how this region is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of a value pick. Like we talked about earlier, there might be upsets. I mean, there's at least a couple. And I could see it because I think this is a Texas team that has been playing bad basketball down the stretch, but they have a really good coach in Sean Miller. He's been here plenty of times. And if you look at the Texas roster, they are definitely athletic enough and talented enough to get a win here. And I think it's a BYU team that, down the stretch of the regular season kind of showed that they were kind of
Mm-hmm.
spiraling. And then they brought it back. They brought it back, I'd say, a bit in the Big 12 tournament, but I just don't see it being enough. It's March. It's so tough to rely on two guys to just go out and score for
Yep.
you. And there's really just nobody else on that team that even entices me to be a scorer. I know Kostick, the freshman down the stretch, was starting to shoot better from outside, and maybe that is their third and missing piece. Maybe he's the guy that fills in for Richie Saunders, and he can knock down and give you 3 or 4 threes in a game, and help projectile you over this first round upset. But I don't think it really matters because I honestly believe that either team would lose to Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga's been playing good enough basketball as of right now. And, I don't see Texas being able to beat Gonzaga. I don't see BYU being able to do it either because I see Graham Ike having his absolute way
Mm-hmm.
with Keba Keita if it even gets to that point. And then their backup center in, I think it's Muhammad, the guy from the Westchester Knicks
Oh,
or Winchester Knicks. He's horrible. So not even remotely worried about him. I think he averages maybe a point per
yeah.
game. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of BYU team that had a lot coming into the year. Could have possibly been, anywhere. I'd say as good of probably a 4 seed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might have been their ceiling if you keep a Richie Saunders healthy, but it showed. They went out, they needed a big guy. They went out and tried to get somebody from the G League. It didn't work out. And now you're left with a starting center who's extremely athletic in Keba Keita, but he's
Yep.
6'8". And that's going to be a problem because he plays really aggressively, but he doesn't know how to play without
Yep.
fouling. And I think that's where it would become a problem for them against Gonzaga if they got there. But I also, like we said, wouldn't be surprised if they lost to
Yeah,
Texas.
no, I would agree with that. I think that Purdue Miami is going to be an interesting game to me. Miami is led by two
Yeah,
guys that both transferred in from Big Ten schools and have played pretty much this exact Purdue team. Right
very good
in
point
Trey
guard region.
Donaldson, yeah, and Malik Renew. This is, I think, going to be a closer game than what people think. Purdue, we see it a lot. When you make a run like what Purdue had and what they did, 4 games in 4 days, and then go to turn around
Yep,
and play in the Big Ten or in the national tournament, there are plenty of times in which we've seen teams have a letdown, right? Think of Auburn against Yale 2 years ago, right? Where Auburn wins the SEC tournament, gets to be a 4 seed, and then loses to Yale in the first round. Now, I don't think Purdue,
yep.
I actually would, Queens is one of the worst teams I've seen in a while, actually. I can't believe they made it.
Yeah,
Purdue, I don't think is going to have a problem with Queens, but I do think when they get to the first problem game against Miami, I could see a world in which if they don't shoot well from three, they struggle. I still think Purdue gets through, and I think Purdue gets through
I
Gonzaga
agree.
pretty comfortably. But I will say that I think that Miami, Florida is a 7 seed that is capable of beating Purdue, right? We talk about down here. I don't necessarily think Kentucky or St. Mary's are capable of beating Houston and Iowa State. We talked about, obviously, we think UCLA is capable of beating UConn. I do think Miami's capable of beating Purdue. I just don't think that they do it. I think they probably get it 3 times out of 10, maybe 4 times out of 10, probably more like 3 times out of 10. But I think this
Yeah.
is going to be one where we see Braden Smith and the seniors kind of take this game over. Up here,
You know what? I give big shout out to Miami really
yeah,
quick. Humongous shout out to what Jai Lucas has done with this
yes,
team. In his first year, and also it's another one of those situations where it's a little bizarre that you are going to give Missouri a game in St. Louis as the 10 seed in their backyard. So that is something to
yep,
look at. I don't think Missouri's good enough to beat Miami. I think Miami's getting disrespected right now. I mean, they finished 25-8, 13-5 in conference. They have guys that have played in the tournament, have the experience. And I think it'll be enough to get the win over Missouri, but definitely watch out for that because it's going to be a Missouri
yes.
home game. And I think that's another one of the geographical mishaps that this committee had, but I wouldn't look too
Yep.
deep into it.
And then we have, I think, Arizona over Utah State. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. This is the
Yeah.
best 5-4 matchup. And I was thinking before we got to the bracket, Wisconsin was a 5 seed I really liked. Arkansas was a 4 seed I really liked. The fact that they have to play each other sucks because these are teams.
It does.
Both
It
of
does.
these teams are teams that if you swap Wisconsin and St. John's, I might have Wisconsin in the Elite Eight. If you swap Kansas and Arkansas, I might have Arkansas in the Elite Eight. It's just how it is. I don't think I could see either one of these teams, whoever wins this game, beating Arizona. It's going to be a heck of a game. I will say this: a lot of attention is being put on Hawaii against Arkansas because of the style of defense that Hawaii plays. They force you to play iso ball. There's a lot of attention, and I think it's really interesting. A lot of attention going towards this. Arkansas has 2 of the best isolation scorers in the SEC.
Yeah.
I don't care if you force them to play iso ball. If you force a team like Michigan State to play iso ball, I'd be concerned. That is not a team that's built to play iso ball. Arkansas is built to play iso ball. Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas are elite, and I mean elite iso ball players. So I don't think Arkansas has a problem with them. I will say this about Arkansas is when we get to the Arkansas-Wisconsin matchup, the thing that I think stands out to me is not Acuff, it is not Malik Thomas, but what it's going to be is I think that the other guys around them, we always talk about how hard it is to win in March with being led by freshmen, right? But I look at this team, and you also have Trayvon Brazil, who's playing spectacular basketball right now.
Fantastic basketball.
You also
right
have
now, yeah.
Billy Richmond, right? Who I understand he's just a sophomore, but this is a guy that was playing big minutes last year when they made a tournament run. You also have DJ Wagner, right? Who is playing 20-plus minutes as a junior that's played plenty of NCAA tournament basketball.
Played very well yesterday against
Yes, he did.
Too.
So I think
he had some big shots down the stretch.
I don't think this is a like a Duke without Caleb Foster where they're reliant on Boozer and almost Boozer and then Damesar and then Kamenia, and then you have Isaiah Evans in there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Isaiah Evans is excluding from the freshman, but they have other guys other than the freshmen. Now, Wisconsin has Nick Boyd, who's playing just unreal basketball right now. John Blackwell, who actually has not been playing his best basketball in the last like couple weeks, but is plenty good. These two guys are studs. This is
Yeah.
I don't even know who to pick. I don't even know who I want to pick. Whoever wins this game, and then the Arizona playing the winner of this game is going to be a great game. Who do you have coming out of this, Nick? I'm going to force you to pick.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, this whole region is the region of really good guards. I mean, you look at every team, you walk the line of the guards
Except
that are in
Gonzaga.
this region. It's besides Gonzaga, but Saint Superi has been playing fantastic basketball as of late. So I mean, hey, he's starting to figure it out as well. I mean, I think this one's a tough one. I did just see before we hopped on here that Nolan Winter has been practicing for Wisconsin, so that is huge. You're going to get your center back, a guy that you really need. He's a versatile guy, somebody that could be a humongous piece for this Wisconsin team. I don't know. It's just so tough because it really is going to come down to, I feel like, at least in my eyes, is it going to come down to Boyd and Blackwell versus Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff Jr.? And I think when you look at it, you see what Acuff can do. I just think he's better. He's better than they are. And then we've seen when he is out, Malik Thomas go off for 30 himself. I mean, he did it on the road at Mizzou in a hard-fought overtime game. He saw that Acuff was out, and he's like, it's my time. I know I can do it. I'm good enough to prove that I can be a lead guard on a team, and he went out and did it. So I think the biggest thing for Arkansas is going to be down the stretch at least is, look, you're playing with a light lineup. I mean, we've seen it in multiple games this year where they get to the point where they're playing deep in their bench. They're playing true freshmen. At one point, they had to play a walk-on forward because they had all their guys foul out, and it was the game against Bama when they lost in overtime. So can they play without foul?
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing because they're not a deep team. Arkansas is not, but Arkansas is the more athletic overall team compared to this Wisconsin team. And I think they can get the job done and get to Arizona. But then I think that's kind of where it runs out. I think they get to Arizona. I think Arizona's too good, too deep of a team for Arkansas to overcome.
Yep, I would agree with that. So now we have 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, and 1-3. We have all 4 1 seeds making the Elite Eight. It's hard. It's annoying, but it's just the world that we live in, right? We're here to make a realistic bracket. We're making our genuine predictions for what we think will happen, not our fun bracket. Trust me, we will both have a fun.
Because in all reality, you look at it, I think there's legitimately 10 teams that can win it all.
Yeah, and even 10.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 10 might even be generous. I'm more on the 8 to 10 side. And that's just how it is. I know it sucks because, people are like, well, I want to see all the fun upset picks. That's just not how it is anymore. And we saw that last year. It's just not how it is. You're not going to see that with the talent gap anymore because all NIL did was make the Power 5 stronger because these guys are willing to go to a smaller Power 5 team or even sit on the bench at some of these Power 5 schools because they're going to make more money doing it there and waiting than actually going and playing at a mid-major where they're getting paid pennies compared to, $100.
Absolutely. So we have Arizona, Purdue. I'm going to lean Purdue in this situation. I think Purdue's playing good basketball. I think if they get to this point, I'm going to lean Purdue. Having said that, I think Arizona's plenty good to beat Purdue here. And I think Iowa State is going to end up in the national championship either way. I think whoever wins this game, I think Iowa State gets, and then Iowa State gets the national championship. I know Iowa State was my third and final sleeper that we had, that I had in our sleepers episode. But Iowa State, I think, is very, very good. I think they match up really well. Obviously, they've played Arizona really tough, and they beat the absolute living hell out of Purdue at Mackey earlier in the year. So I think Iowa State's in the national championship in my mind. I'm curious, do you have a strong opinion on the Arizona-Purdue game?
I think it's going to be a really good game. I do. I think, this is a team in Purdue that, started off the year as the number 1 overall team and kind of got written off. Everybody kind of looked at him and was like, halfway through the year, like 5 losses at Mackey. Like this isn't the usual Purdue team that we're looking for. And they had their struggles, and we've called it out. They aren't a very good defensive team. They weren't getting the kind of production they needed on offense out of some of their, veteran, higher level guys, but they found it in the Big Ten tournament. So let's see if they can carry it. Let's see if they can continue on with it. And I think, no matter who picks the bracket, they're going to take Purdue far. I think that's just how it is. I've already seen multiple analysts pick Purdue to win the whole thing.
Yep.
Now, could that be a complete farce because they just went and had a good Big Ten tournament run? Yes. Do I think it is? Not really. I think that they are very much capable of getting to the Elite Eight. And, if they catch Arizona on an off night, I think they could beat them. Now, I probably wouldn't take Purdue over Arizona here, but I'm completely fine with doing it because I agree with you. I think Iowa State goes to the national championship game and plays against Florida.
I think to your point of Gonzaga is, in my opinion, the clear-cut worst 3 seed. And so I think Purdue's in a great spot to have Gonzaga as your 3 seed. And I will say I am beginning to agree with you a little bit more on the Arizona Purdue side, in the sense that I think a lot of things have to go correct for Purdue to win that game. And we've seen them shoot the 3-point ball really, really well in games and still lose. And I think that's a concern, is if they, for some reason, don't shoot the 3 ball really, really well, can you still win the game? I really don't think they would be able to against Arizona. I think Jaden Bradley's too good. Then we have an Iowa State Florida national championship. This is the score I've been putting in for every single one, just because it's a classic one, and realistically, it never comes down to your score. So don't stress about that too much. But there you go. There's the Final Four. We have Michigan State playing against Florida. Florida coming out on top. You have Arizona playing Iowa State. Iowa State getting a little bit of revenge for the Big 12 semifinals matchup there. And then Florida beating Iowa State. I think that's going to be a close game. That's going to be a hell of a game. I mean, great front courts on both sides. I think really good guard play on the Iowa State side, and potentially really good guard play on the Florida side. But I think we have Florida going back to back here for the first time since 2 years ago when UConn did it, for the first time since 06-07 when the Florida Gators did it then as well. So this is going to be a heck of a bracket. I think we're going to be set up for a lot of really, really, really good blockbuster matchups late in the tournament, which is what we want as neutral fans. The Cinderella stories are awesome. Yes, don't get me wrong. However, the only problem with Cinderella stories is most times at some point they play, if you're going to have a 13 seed make the Elite Eight,
they flame out.
At some point they're going to play like a 13 seed, and then it's not going to be a great Elite Eight game. Whereas when you've got Michigan playing Iowa State, damn well that's going to be a great game.
Exactly.
This is the official Sports Geeks bracket. After the first 2 rounds, we will come out with our Sweet 16 bracket and build that one out as well, because I'm sure we will miss something here, just like we kind of always do. But I think this is actually a really good bracket. I feel pretty confident in this, Nick.
Yeah, I like this one a lot.
And we'll have more stuff next week. But other than that, this has been the Sports Geeks podcast. They play, we talk. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.